We live in a divided time. It's not hard to take a look at the news or your news feed or any other place that you find yourself having conversations with people to realize that we are polarized in almost every single thing that we find ourselves talking about. Everyone, it's kind of this what I call the hot take culture, right? Like everyone has a hot take. Everyone has like an opinion that is like the most right opinion that they could ever think of. And if you don't agree with their opinion, then you're like completely on the other side of the coin. There's very little like middle ground anymore. And that's not surprising if we think about the scriptures and we think about the gospel. The first component of the gospel, the kind of the building blocks of the gospel, is that we all have sin in our lives, and that sin leads to separation between us and God, absolutely, but also separation between us and the people around us, right? And so we see the first sin in the Garden of Eden. There's separation between Adam and God, but then there's also a separation between Adam and Eve, right? And so we see that happening all throughout our culture, is that the less God is involved in the culture, the more polarized or separation we can experience as a culture. And it is in the midst of that separation, it's in that gap of disunity that the enemy begins to fight the most against us. That is the enemy's playing field, is in that separation of disunity. He loves to make us divided. And disunity is happening in the church as well, right? The church, you can go to 5 different churches and you'll have 5 different experiences, and you'll talk to 500 different people that are mad about something, right? Like people in the church are fighting about music, what songs we sing, what kind of songs we sing, what instruments we play, what instruments we don't play, who sings, who doesn't sing. The church is fighting about leadership style. The church is fighting about Bible translations. Seriously. The church is fighting about masks and vaccines and politics and power. We saw the summer of 2020, in the midst of all of that, we saw the church fighting about racial justice. And we see like the wave of that move towards fighting about women's rights and the response to the LGBTQ community. Like the churches just can't figure out how to be unified. And that's a problem. Because Jesus didn't come and give his life for our preferences. He came, died, rose again to rescue us from our preferences and remind us of the mission of God is to seek and save the lost. Jesus didn't come so we can sing the kind of music that you like. Jesus came and gave up his life because your neighbors do not have a relationship with him. They're experiencing that separation between themselves and God. And that separation is defined as hell. That is eternity without God. They're experiencing life now without God, and they will experience life for eternal without God. The purpose of Jesus coming to give up his life is to seek and save the lost. And now we see the church is more segmented. There's more disunity in the church than there has ever been in the history of the church. We live in this post-Christian world where the majority of people, more than 50%, even in this community, even in this region, over 50%, probably trending towards 60 to 65% of people would identify themselves as religious nones, N-O-N-E, meaning they have no religious affiliation. So that other percentage, which is the minority, that encompasses any and all religions, not just Christianity. So we live in this world where the majority of the people in our community, in our areas, would not consider themselves any type of religion, have very little faith. And the church used to be a place where people would go to seek guidance, and that's no longer the case because the world is looking at the church and saying, y'all are more dysfunctional than my life. Why would I come and ask you guys questions? So the church's disunity has ruined our witness. And then we, as the church, as the collective church, not just our church, but all of the churches, have began to fight against one another and have forgotten that we have an actual enemy that we are supposed to be fighting against. And that enemy is now running free and is having a heyday. And so what are we supposed to do about this? What we're supposed to do is what the world needs to see is a united church. I'm not talking about like one church that would rule all churches, but churches that are connected to one another. We cannot experience unity when we're holding on to our secondary and even tertiary opinions. We must seek unity. What does it look like to seek unity? And that's where we get to our value as a church of kingdom collaboration. At the core of kingdom collaboration, at the core of what we did last week was seeking unity within churches in our region. And so we're going to look at John 17, where Jesus is talking about unity, and hopefully challenge ourselves and then maybe even challenge the way we look at church in general. But before we do that, I want us to take some time and ask the Lord to speak to us. So close your eyes. Take a deep breath. I know the cold is distracting and the wind is distracting. And just ask the Lord, say, God, please just help me to focus on you this morning. For the next few minutes, help me to keep my ears tuned to your voice. And speak to me, Lord. And I ask you to pray for the person on your right and on your left, that they would hear from the Lord as well, that they would not be distracted, but they would hear the word of the Lord this morning. Pray for the person in front of you as well. We're all connected. We're all working together. We need to be unified. So pray for them, whether you know them or not. Just ask the Lord to speak to them. Pray blessings on their life this morning. And then finally, I just ask you to pray for me, that I might speak the words of the Lord and not my own. Lord, we receive that. It's in your name we pray. Amen. All right, so we're going to be in John 17. We're just going to look at a couple verses here, starting in verse 20. This is Jesus speaking, talking to his disciples, and then he enters into this prayer time, all right? It's called the high priestly prayer, and Jesus is praying for the church. And he says this, starting in verse 20, I do not ask for these only, talking about the believers, or the people that are church folk already. I do not ask for these only, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us. So that the world may believe, one, that you have sent me. So that the world may believe that you have sent me. To the glory that you have given me, I have given to them, that they may be one, even as we are one. I in them and you in me, that they may become perfectly one, so that the world may know that you have sent me and loved them, even as you loved me. This is Jesus' prayer for us as the church. It's beautiful. It's all about unity. But let's understand what the church means. So when we say the word church or the church, there is multiple layers that we need to think about. So when we talk about the church, like capital C church, that would be all believers. It's the bride of Christ is the church. This would be all believers at all times that are part. We're all part of the same family. Not the specific churches that you attend, but the church, the big church. This is the biggest umbrella that you can think about. Everyone that has surrendered their life to Jesus is a part of the church. And then our congregation or our context is a church. It's a local expression, local churches, local networks, denominations. We are all part of the church, but we have these individual expressions. And even in the New Testament, Paul and other writers would write letters to the church in a city and then name several different groups of people, that the church in their house and the church in their house and the church in their house. So it wasn't just a church in a city, but there's multiple churches in the city that all fell underneath the city church umbrella, that all fell underneath the big C church umbrella. And so when Jesus is praying for the church, he's praying for us individually in our context, but also all of the church, our churches. But we're all one. We're all called to be one. And so we're called by God to be united, to be one as God is one. And Jesus is talking to the Father, and he's saying that they might be one like we are one. So this is a little bit of like a theological proper, right? There is the Trinity, which is Father, Son, and Spirit. The three persons of God. All are God, but there is also one God. This is this ultimate form of unity. And there are functions that each person of the Trinity have, and there's this mutual submission to one another. Not that one is in charge of all, but there's this mutual submission to all. And so Jesus is saying, just as we are all one, the Trinity, I'm praying that the church would be one. That no matter where you live, no matter what congregation you attend, no matter what music that you like, no matter what translation that you find yourself doing, no matter what convictions the Lord has maybe given you individually, that we might pursue unity, that the church might be one. Why? You know, like parents, you understand this. Like sometimes you tell your kids to do something and they ask why. And we don't have to tell them why. Sometimes it's like, well, actually, because I want you to do this. There's no reason that I need to explain to you as to why. But then there's teachable moments that we're like, well, actually, I want you to do this because of this. This is one of those moments that Jesus is telling us, hey, the reason why unity is so important is, yes, because I said so. Absolutely. But here's a glimpse behind the curtain. That when the church is unified, two things happen. The people that are far from God will see that God has sent me, the Son, to save them. That they would believe in Jesus, and that they would believe in not that he just was a real person, that he was sent by God, but that he died a sacrificial death for them. Right? That they will believe that you have sent me, and that the world may know that I have loved them, even as you have loved me. So the reason that Jesus tells us to be unified, ultimately, so that the world might know the love of Jesus. That our unity, the church's unity, is a reason, is a witness to the world around us that might be watching and might be snickering and laughing at the disunity that they've seen the church arguing and all over the place, the church in the news, but that our unity might be a witness to the world around us that Jesus loves them. What a beautiful picture. That kingdom collaboration, our value of kingdom collaboration, is simply our desire to live out John 17 as best we can. is that we might pursue unity within other churches. That we might link arms with other churches and say, hey, we're all part of the same team. That we can do these things together because, yeah, you might do a couple things differently than us. You might think about some things differently than us. But ultimately, we're part of the same family. And so if we're part of the same family, why don't we work together against the same enemy? Early on in our church planting journey, even before we moved here, I began to, I remember where I was. I was at a conference, a church planting conference. I was worshiping. And the Lord gave me this picture. I didn't understand it fully. It's like one of those Polaroids that like you can see a little bit of it and then you kind of wait a little bit more and more of it is explained, or you can see a little bit more context. He gave me this picture of a battle that our church was fighting. Okay, spiritual warfare, that kind of stuff. But it was this picture, and it's becoming more clear now. It was this picture of us fighting, our church congregation fighting alongside of other platoons, other groups of soldiers fighting that weren't part of our congregation, weren't part of our church, that we were functioning as an army of a bunch of churches as opposed to one church as an army. Because this is the world that we live in now. Each church kind of thinks about themselves as an army. Hey, we're fighting to push back the darkness in our context, in our area, in our community, whatever language they might use. But we are an army and we need to push back the darkness. That is a true statement, but that we is so much bigger than we could ever imagine. That we is us and other churches all around the community. We are all the army that God has placed here in this community to make a difference to those religious nuns. Those people who have no desire to be a part of the family of God. But through our unity, we might be able to push back the darkness so that the light will creep into their own life. And they'll experience freedom and joy. Because a byproduct of church unity is that we have a bigger impact than we could do on our own. That we are better together. And another beautiful thing that is a byproduct of church unity is that, like, we're relatively new. And there can be a sense that, like, at times we feel like, man, we're feeling a little alone. Or I know of pastors of churches in even our area that are just like, man, I just feel like there's no one else that I could talk to. I feel like there's no one else like trying. I feel all by myself. I feel like I'm on an island. When we are unified, when we're pursuing kingdom collaboration, no church should feel alone because we are all together. So this coming week, I'm going to sit down with several other pastors in our area just for lunch and prayer. Why? Because we're together. How are we going to be unified if we don't spend time with one another, unifying our hearts, praying to the one who is in charge of the army, not my army? We live in such a Western culture that's like all about us and all about us being the best and the biggest. When what we need to understand is if you want to really have great impact, link arms. Link arms. And one of the best byproducts of church unity is that we are reminded of the mission of God. When we have to work with other churches that might do other things differently than us, that might think about things differently than us, it would be easy for us to talk about the things that divide us. But when we begin to talk about the things that unite us, we are reminded that there are people that are living out in our community, that live on our streets, that go to our works, that play sports with our kids, that we see at the grocery store. There are tons and tons of people who are far from God If we begin to work with other churches, we have to have a single mindset of like, hey, what can we do to reach those people for the gospel? What can we do to help those people understand their sin leads to separation, but there was a sacrifice that was made for them by Jesus, that he deeply loves them to the point that he gave up his life for them so that they can be reconciled back to God, so that that separation could be fixed by the blood of Jesus. And they don't have to do anything to earn that, but all they have to do is surrender their life to him, to give up. And that God doesn't take all their hopes and dreams away, but he redeems those things and then sends them into the world to share those things with their neighbors and to their friends and their coworkers. It makes sense. And so how is this playing out at Third Coast? This is not us saying that we're the only ones thinking this way, but this is our story. It has been a value of ours from inception. Our church was actually started by several churches. There were some significant investment by a couple of churches, but we had over 24 churches invest in us from the very beginning. They gave us money, they gave us resources. All the setup equipment that we have was given to us by churches. They linked arms with us and they said, hey, we believe that you're going to reach people that we can't reach, and so here. The seats that you're sitting in, a church in the city gave to us. Like all of these things, we were started by over 24 churches coming together to say, hey, we believe in you, and go. And then we're a small church. We're a new church. We don't have a ton of finances, but we've been able to be a part of some church planting initiatives. There are... It's a slide. It's not in order. I didn't put it in order, but there's some pictures up here. There's 6 churches that we as a church have played a part of helping them fund ministry. It's not like we wrote them like sizable checks or anything like that, but Sojourn Oak Forest, Resonate, Sojourn Southside, who were here a couple months ago, and several of you have visited Resonate and Southside. Refuge Church, a church in the city that's reaching Afghan refugees in a community where they are completely outcast. Blaine has actually preached here. He will come and preach here again. The West Church that is meeting literally blocks away from the biggest street where human trafficking and is happening in the city. They're meeting right there, trying to say, hey, what would it look like if we shined a light on this to make a difference? The Gathering Church, an Anglican church in Richmond that we have partnered with because we believe in what they're doing. And there are dozens of other church planters that we have met with that have come and watched what we have done, that have asked questions about our church and what it looks like, our kids ministry and why it's so awesome. Like all of these kinds of things. I want to just be honest with you, 10% of my job description is supposed to be investing in other churches. We are tithing my time to help other churches fulfill their vision of reaching the lost in their communities. And so when people call up and say, hey, do you want to have lunch? Another pastor, I'm like, yeah, that's part of my job. Hey, can you come and help me understand this? Yeah, that's part of my job. I cannot wait to help you because we are all part of the same team. We're all part of the same team. And there's something beautiful that's about to happen in May. It's called Servolution. It's something that's been happening for several years now, and I caught wind of it from Jervy, our friend at Resonate. And I was like, Jervy, why didn't you tell me about this? You know I would be in. He's like, it's next week. And I'm like, dude, we can't do it next week. I'm sorry. I was like, but hey, let me be a part of this. And so May the 2nd, that's wrong. March the 2nd's already passed. May the 2nd, though, is a future date. I guess March the 2nd is the future, but that's neither here nor there. May the 2nd, is that, do what? May the 2nd, May the 6th, I don't know, there's a date out there. May the 6th, it's on my notes here. Just read it. Don't worry about the slides. May the 6th, which is a Saturday, over 10 churches in the Texas City, Dickinson, Lamarck area. So like right here, over 10 churches are coming together to do something called Servolution, where we are going to not say, hey, my church is going to go do this and your church is going to do this. No. We're taking all the cards and we're putting them in one deck and we're going to shuffle them up and say, hey, we got 10 people that are going to help this place and 10 people that are going to help over here and 20 people that are going to help over here. And you're going to be serving by people that don't even go to your church, but they're part of the church, right? And they might not even be a part of the church. We're going to invite people from our community to be a part of this as well. Why? Because a united church is the best witness to show the love of Jesus. And so mark your calendars for the correct date, May the 6th. We have a link on our website that you can sign up for Servolution. And there are opportunities for any skill level, kids, adults, like all of these kinds of things. And then at the end of it, there's going to be like a really cool little meal that is going to be provided so that we can kind of sit down and talk with some of these people that you're working alongside. It's going to be a beautiful thing. And it's this picture of kingdom collaboration that's already happening in our community. It's not like, hey, we're the kingdom collaborators here. No, they're already doing this. This lady, Ingrid Clark, has become a friend of mine. She's running point on this, and she's killing it. And we're like, that's great. We want to be a part of this. How can we make this even better? We're going to come and we're going to serve. This is what it looks like for us to live out John 17 in our context. But that would be easy, wouldn't it? That would be easy for us to say, hey, we're doing this, but where's the ownership of ourselves? Because for the church to experience unity, we must pursue unity individually in the relationships that we have. Because if the church is going to be united, we are a part of the church. And so we must pursue unity in our own selves, in our own relationship network that we have. We must pursue unity within our culture and within our context, within the small groups. Life is difficult. When you interact with other sinners, you will get hurt. I did premarital counseling with a couple on Friday, and one of the things I told them is Ephesians chapter 2 is the most important passage about marriage in the entire Bible. And they're like, it doesn't say anything about marriage. I was like, I know, but it says that you're a filthy sinner and you're going to sin against that person more than anyone else will in your entire life. And until you can understand that and understand that the grace that has been given to you is then, you are able to then extend that to one another to show the gospel, that we experience the gospel, and we begin to show the gospel to one another, you're going to struggle because sinful people sin against one another. When you're in a community, sinful people sin against one another. And for us to pursue unity, it takes effort, and it takes work, it takes tears, it takes heartbreak, but it's worth it. Why? Because when we do this, it shows the love of Jesus to those that are around us. So we must pursue it individually, we must pursue it corporately, and we must pursue it regionally. We must mutually submit to one another just as the Trinity mutually submits to one another, that we might be one like they are one, Father, Son, and Spirit. Kingdom collaboration is not only a value of ours, it is a necessity. If we're going to show our community the love of Jesus, we must be unified, not just within our own body, but within our other churches and other bodies around us. We've allowed this to go on far too long. We must start now and stand up for the sake of those who are far from Christ. It begins with us. So, I want you to think about this. We're going to enter into a time of reflection, and I want you to think about these two questions. I want you to think about this question. How can you be pursuing unity? Are there areas in your life that you have dug your heels in the ground that you need to ask the Lord to bring some humility in this area? How can you be pursuing unity? And then what do you need to let go in this pursuit? What are some preferences maybe that you're holding on to really tightly? Because this is not for your own preferences. This is for the sake of those who are far from the Lord. And so we believe that spiritual formation happens when we hear something and we think about it, but then we take the step, the uncomfortable step at times, to discuss that with someone else. Because sometimes it exposes our own sinfulness. Sometimes it makes it more real when we say it out loud. But we want to give you some space to gather in groups of 2 or 3 and talk about the things that the Lord may be doing in your own heart. Not to gripe about other people, but to talk about what you can own. So we're going to give you these questions. How can you be pursuing unity? What do you need to let go? And then what's a part that you can play in kingdom collaboration? We give you some time to talk about those things, and then our worship team is going to come back up and sing.